Tonight on Bridge City News, there was quite the controversy at the Chinook Regional Hospital over the weekend involving Alberta Premier Rachel Notley. We will explain. The measles outbreak has made its way to our province. We chat with a doctor about how you can best protect yourself and your family. And a by-election is taking place in BC today, which will determine the fate of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. There was some controversy surrounding Alberta Premier Rachel Notley following a recent event at the Chinook Regional Hospital in Lethbridge. Notley addressed the media and hospital staff over the weekend inside of a common area within the hospital. She took shots at UCP leader Jason Kenney about exploring privately delivered healthcare options. It turns out that AHS policy prevents political events at any AHS facility. Section 2.1 of Policy 1148 says, AHS facilities shall not be used for any political activity, including but not limited to the use for purposes of canvassing, campaigning, political announcements, touring, and other activities. A spokesperson for the Premier, Cheryl Oates, said that no tax dollars went into this announcement, and the nurses who came to speak about the dangers of privatized health care came on their own time. UCP leader Jason Kenney was not impressed, and he tweeted out, "It is an unethical abuse of public resources for the NDP leader to hold a partisan news conference in a public hospital as she did today, Saturday. Those are party, not government signs. This is explicitly prohibited by AHS policy. Stop campaigning at public expense, call the election." The UCP has now called on the province's ethics commissioner to investigate the incident. Health officials in our province issued advisories yesterday that hundreds of people may have been exposed to measles. A traveler with a confirmed case passed through at least 2 airports, including one in Edmonton, and made several stops along the way.
In southern Alberta, because of our low immunization rates and pockets of individuals who are not immune, either through natural disease or immunity, I'm always extremely worried that we have an outbreak. Because when you have a large population that is not immune, the measles virus travels very quickly between people through the air as well. And so then we see larger communities impacted. There is no treatment for measles. Measles is a viral illness. The incubation period, so after being exposed, is anywhere from 7 to 21 days.
Dr. Sutorp says anyone not sure of their status should call HealthLink or your physician in order to prevent transmission. Lethbridge Transit is now on board with making their buses even more convenient for people who are deaf and blind. Ainsley O'Reilly explains the impact today's grand opening will have on the community as a whole.
When you get on the bus in Lethbridge today, you'll notice some new additions.
Next stop, Utlands Boulevard and Kodiak Boulevard.
Deaf and blind people will now be able to read and hear their next stop.
It's just part of accessibility. You know, we have people with hearing and visual impairments, and it's just part of our customer service.
It puts a lot of stress on them trying to communicate with people so they can get back on track to where they're supposed to go. It helps the commute be more streamlined. They can get there at ease and safely.
Funded through Green Trip and the federal gas tax, the whole project cost over $420,000. It's a project that Lethbridge Transit has been working on for over 4 years. They say it'll benefit everyone.
If you haven't ridden the bus or you're new to Lethbridge and you have an idea of where you're going, but where that is, you're not sure. And it also, it's a less of a distraction for the driver. So in the past, the drivers would assist, which they still will do. However, it does give you that visual and audio clue, even if you don't have those disabilities.
LTS is also doing what they can to help people with physical disabilities.
All our buses have ramps. We have what we call low floor buses, so the bus sits lower to the road, so we can actually lower the bus. And then on top of that, we have ramps on all our buses, so all our buses are accessible for people with physical disabilities, so that they can wheelchairs and walkers can get onto the bus.
In addition to all 42 buses having a brand new audio and visual system, Operations Supervisor Mike Ross says that back in January they installed 8 Quantum buses. Those buses allow for wheelchairs to clamp on as opposed to dealing with straps. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Jingle Mail. It's when a homeowner mails the house keys to a mortgage lender because of an inability to make the mortgage payment. Many in the housing industry says it's uncommon in the Alberta residential market and is sometimes an act of desperation.
It's really unfortunate. There are some things that we can do as brokers to help in that situation. Like if you have equity in your home, we can maybe refinance you with a private lender just to, it's usually a band-aid solution for a year or so until you get back on your feet. If there's no equity, sometimes the best thing to do is just sell your property and get rid of your mortgage as quick as you can.
Jensen says if you make a strategic default, it will follow you, leaving a mark on your credit for the next 6 to 7 years, making it harder to borrow again. The Lethbridge College Kodiak's men's volleyball team is celebrating today. They won silver at the ACAC Conference Championships in Edmonton on Saturday. They lost in 3 sets to the host A team in the final, but this marks the first time the Kodiaks have ever earned an ACAC medal. It was an incredible season by the Kodiaks, which set a team record for wins with 22 and was ranked in the CCAA top 3 for the first time ever. Injured Humboldt Bronco player Ryan Strechnitsky is planning to undergo surgery in Thailand in April. He hopes the procedure will help him to restore a little movement following last April's tragic bus crash, which killed 16 and injured 13 others. Strechnitsky, who was paralyzed from the chest down, has been undergoing physio, but he's hoping this trip to Thailand will help improve his quality of life.
So Ryan is looking at going to Thailand to do the same procedure that Dr. Richie Gill had done previously in the fall. It is a device that goes over the spinal cord and it sends messages out into the rest of the body. So that part, relatively straightforward. It is the rehab afterwards that is arduous and tedious, and that's where Ryan's strength and fortitude comes in, is that you have to commit.
They put some sort of stim pad above the injury or below the injury, and they don't know why it works, but it works, and I kind of want to get that going. Just anything, even getting some core muscles back would be awesome, and I think would help improve my daily life. Anything helps, obviously keeping that positive mindset, pushing myself every day, and having the hopes that I can walk again. But for now, I'm just doing what I can, and hopefully this Thailand trip helps boost that.
Alberta's Chelsea Carey forced an extra end at the Scotties Tournament of Hearts, then beat Ontario 8-6 over the weekend.
It's getting more and more real, I guess, but you just never expect to win a game against a team that's so good when they're in front. We got down early, and I thought it felt a lot like the Trials final. I thought they're so hard to come back on because they're such good hitters, so you just don't expect to win, and then even, you still expect her to make that draw, so I just wasn't prepared, but I'm over the moon, obviously. It's great.
The province of Alberta has created a new anti-racism advisory council. The group, led by Education Minister David Eggen, will be dedicated to combating racism. The council includes 24 members. It is the first of its kind in our province. Alberta says in a statement that more than 300 Albertans applied to participate on the council. Members were selected for their leadership abilities and experience in advocating for diverse communities. The council includes people from various faith groups and represents many regions across the province. While we've been dealing with extreme cold and snow here in southwestern Alberta, in Ontario today, snow and poor road conditions caused a major pileup near Barrie. Provincial police say more than 70 vehicles were involved, which shut down Highway 400 in both directions. The crash involved several tractor trailers, including one that ended up spilling 500 liters of diesel. Fortunately, there were only minor injuries reported. Today's 3 federal by-elections will give the Conservatives a glimpse into how much damage they may sustain from the breakaway People's Party of Canada. It's the first time Maxime Bernier's party will be put to an electoral test. One of the by-elections in the BC riding of Burnaby South will also determine whether or not NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will finally land a seat. Many within the party say he is finished as leader if he does not win the seat today. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer wants Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to appear and answer the Commons Justice Committee's questions on the SNC-Lavalin affair. He plans to introduce a motion to that effect and wants the session to be televised before March 15th. Scheer says Canadians should be outraged at what has transpired in connection with the SNC-Lavalin case.
Quite simply, what we've seen unfold over the last 2 weeks is a textbook case of government corruption, with those at the very top of the Prime Minister's office implicated in what could very well be the obstruction of justice. What's clear is that the independent top prosecutor in Canada ruled that SNC-Lavalin did not qualify for the special deal that Parliament had passed earlier this year. The Attorney General then decided that she would not intervene, that she would not overrule that independent decision. Then the continued and sustained effort to get the former Attorney General to change her mind continued, culminating in her being removed from her post. So all those key facts put together certainly indicate that there was inappropriate interference in this case.
Former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould is expected to appear before the committee as early as tomorrow. She will discuss allegations she faced inappropriate pressure from the PM's office to halt a criminal prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. U.S. President Donald Trump is heading to a second meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Trump says he's expecting some big things.
I think we'll have a very tremendous summit. We want denuclearization, and I think he'll have a country that will set a lot of records for speed in terms of an economy. And I told you last night, it was a lovely dinner, but I told you how well we did with our trade talks in China. And it looks like they'll be coming back quickly again, and we're going to have another summit. We're going to have a signing summit, which is even better. So hopefully we can get that completed, but we're getting very, very close.
2 bodies have been recovered at a site in Texas where a Boeing 767 cargo plane crashed into a coastal bay. According to the plane's owner, all 3 people aboard the plane died.
At 12:36 local time, the aircraft was cleared to descend to 3,000 feet. And at 12:39, while the aircraft was approximately 6,000 feet at a speed of 240 knots, communications was lost with the aircraft, as was radar contact. There was no distress call. We have conducted aerial surveys in helicopters today, as well as up-close examinations of the debris field via airboats.
R&B singer R. Kelly, who was arrested Friday on 10 counts of aggravated sexual abuse, 3 of whom were minors, appeared in court earlier today. He pleaded not guilty to the abuse. A second video, however, has been turned over to the courts, allegedly showing Kelly sexually abusing a minor.
I can confirm that earlier today we handed over a second videotape to prosecutors. The videotape depicts Mr. Kelly engaged in illegal sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl. It is approximately 55 minutes in length. The conduct in the tape can be described as nothing short of outrageous, illegal. It leaves no question as to Mr. Kelly's guilt. In addition, over the weekend, we have encountered a number of additional witnesses who we have interviewed, who we are in the process of preparing to meet with prosecutors. Each of these witnesses describe a decades-long system of abuse by Mr. Kelly.
It was on this date that Muhammad Ali becomes world boxing champion, ex-Beatle George Harrison is born, and Samuel Colt patents the revolver. This is Today in History for February the 25th.
February 25th, 1986. People power in the Philippines. Longtime leader Ferdinand Marcos flees the country amid mass protest after a tainted election. Corazon Aquino, who ran against Marcos in that election, is installed as the new president. 1956. In Moscow, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev harshly criticizes his predecessor, the late Joseph Stalin. Khrushchev denounces Stalin's cult of personality and abuses in power during a then-secret speech before a Communist Party Congress. 1836. Inventor Samuel Colt patents his revolver, a move that eventually popularizes the weapon's use. 1964.
I'm going to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. His hands can't hit what his eyes can't see.
Cassius Clay, later known as Muhammad Ali, becomes world heavyweight boxing champ, beating Sonny Liston in Miami Beach, Florida. And 1943. Musician George Harrison, known as the Quiet One of the Beatles, is born in Liverpool, England. Today in History, February 25th. Tim McGuire, The Associated Press.
One of the movies you can catch at the movie mill here in Lethbridge is The Green Book. Now, what's special about this film is that it won Best Picture at this weekend's Oscars. The movie's directors said when they made the film, it wasn't about winning any award.
We didn't start off to make a movie that would win an award. I've never gotten an award, ever. And in fact, I was never at a film festival before Toronto. But when we were there and we won it, I thought, oh, okay, this could be, this movie might go someplace. So I wasn't stunned. But thank you very much.
More than 19,000 people gave their lives to Christ at a recent Christian festival on the Ivory Coast. The event involved evangelist Andrew Palau, and 2,200 churches brought more than 100,000 people together.
It's great to be here in beautiful Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan, the capital city, one more time.
This is Andrew's 10th capital city. Abidjan is a city of 7 million people. We've had many, many different outreaches in the schools where, again, we've had wonderful response with the kids. The BMX guys have been out riding their bikes, soccer clinics, and then, of course, our eyeglass clinics. We actually saw over 12,000 people over the course of 2 years of really engaging relationships. As we partnered with the churches here in the city, we were able to see over 2,200 churches come together from every denomination. We're heading into the festival now. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
This is really, really, really wonderful for the local church because this brings a new style of evangelism in the local church.
And he also is calling, come, viens, follow me, suis-moi, follow me, suis-moi. I will give you the light of life.
19,000 people giving their lives to Christ. That is incredible. What's also incredible, too, is how much cold February has seen so far in southwestern Alberta. Environment Canada issued another extreme cold warning for our region today. Fortunately, warmer temperatures are on the horizon. Complete weather details are coming right up. We had another extreme cold warning today. Tonight, periods of snow developing with a low near -22. Tomorrow, more snow developing up to 4 centimeters and a high of -17. Clearing on Wednesday with the mercury climbing to -7. Mostly cloudy and -9 is expected on Thursday. Friday, a high pressure system returns, blowing out the clouds, but the temperature will drop to -16. Pretty much the same picture on Saturday. Sunday, mainly sunny with a high near -13. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is +3 and an average low of -9. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1992 at 19 degrees. And the record low was -33 in 1994. Sunrise was at 7:23, sunset at 6:06. Let's have a look at how tomorrow is shaping up across the country now. Vancouver will be mainly sunny and 4 degrees. Victoria had a wind warning today. Tomorrow partly cloudy and a high of 3. A good chance of flurries for Calgary tomorrow and a high of only -12. Edmonton will be mainly sunny and -12 as well. Light snow and -18 for Regina on Tuesday. Mainly sunny and -17 for Saskatoon. Snow and -16 is on tap for Winnipeg tomorrow. A chance of flurries and -6 for Toronto. Ottawa will have a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of -12. Expect a mainly sunny sky, -12 as well for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be cloudy and -13. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have flurries off and on and should see high of -11. Charlottetown, PEI will be cloudy and -12. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect flurries and a high of -3 on Tuesday. Alberta Pork says a second case of porcine epidemic diarrhea has turned up in the province. The producer group says the new case is at a 600-head operation but did not specify where. The first PED case in Alberta was detected last month at a 400-head farm in central Alberta. The disease affects pigs but poses no risk to human health. The first Canadian case was confirmed in January of 2014 on a swine farm in Ontario. It has since been reported in Manitoba, Quebec, and Prince Edward Island. Tim Rempel is a business owner who has 8 Booster Juice franchises. Tim says in over 25 years of being an entrepreneur, this past year was one of the toughest.
In the 26 years that we've been in business, this last
couple of years has been the first time I've ever felt like as a small business owner, I'm under attack, almost, insofar as just with everything that's piled on, with the increase in minimum wage, changes to stat pay, changes to other HR standards, carbon taxes, which have increased all of our input costs, that sort of thing. It really has made a change to how we operate and how we do business.
Catch my entire interview with Mr. Rempel as he discusses the highs and lows of owning a small business. That's coming up right after business news. German prosecutors have fined BMW the equivalent of $12.7 million for installing defective engine software. It led to excessive diesel emissions in nearly 8,000 cars. Prosecutors say they found no evidence of fraud, but faulted the Bavarian company for what it called insufficient quality control. BMW accepts the penalty for what it says was a frustrating and highly regrettable error. The fine is small compared to the nearly $41 billion in fines and settlements paid by VW after it admitted to intentionally manipulating engine software so diesel cars could pass emissions tests. British Prime Minister Theresa May is rejecting a call from the head of the European Council to delay her country's departure from the European Union. EC President Donald Tusk says the chances of a withdrawal agreement being concluded by the March 29th deadline are highly unlikely. Tusk says extending the deadline would allow businesses more time to prepare, but May says she believes it is possible for Britain to leave the EU with a deal on March 29th. That is where all of our country's energies should be focused. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the United Conservative Party is calling on the Ethics Commissioner to look into some controversy surrounding Alberta Premier Rachel Notley following a recent event at the Chinook Regional Hospital. Notley addressed the media and hospital staff over the weekend inside of a common area within the hospital. She took shots at UCP leader Jason Kenney about exploring privately delivered healthcare options. It turns out that AHS policy prevents political events at any AHS facility. UCP leader Jason Kenney tweeted out that it is an unethical abuse of public resources for the NDP leader to hold a partisan news conference in a public hospital. So what does it take to run a successful business? Up next, we chat with the owner of 8 Booster Juice franchises, Mr. Tim Rempel, about the do's and don'ts in small business. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come out to an all-new Watoto Children's Choir Tour on Wednesday, February 27th at 6:30 p.m. at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Lethbridge. This free concert is a vibrant worship experience, highlighting Watoto projects which have saved hundreds of orphan children. Allow their stories and live worship to touch your heart. For more information about Watoto, visit watoto.com. PBR Canada's Elite Monster Energy Tour is coming to the NMAX Centre on March 1st and 2nd for the Bridge City Chrysler LA Towing PBR Challenge. Come see Canada's best bull riders alongside some of the league's top international athletes square off against the toughest bucking bulls from across the nation. Tickets start at $30 and are available by calling 403-329-7328 or purchase online at nmaxcentre.ca. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a non-profit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or email lethbridgelegalguidance@telus.net. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Many people dream of starting up their own business, but it is a big leap of faith. There's risk and reward, and oftentimes people lack knowledge of how to go about becoming self-employed. Tim Rempel is a Lethbridge businessman with over 26 years of experience as an entrepreneur. He also works with Economic Development Lethbridge with Tech Connect as an advisor for people who are just starting up a new business. Welcome to Bridge City News, Tim.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Now, Tim, share a little bit about your story. How did you first get going as a self-employed person?
And it's not the long meandering story. I'll give you the Coles Notes.
Sure.
And I come from a farming background. I grew up in a farm. So in essence, small business was built into my blood because a farm is a small business. I didn't want to farm though. And after going to school, believe it or not, as an electronics technologist, which has nothing to do with anything I'm doing today.
Okay.
But that progressed to one thing, to the next, to the next, to the next. And opportunities came along and we took advantage of those, and that's how we ended up here.
And I have a booster juice, correct?
Correct. We have 8 locations currently.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
But the Bautista Blast is gone ever since he left the Jays, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The contract was over. That was done. Yeah.
So that was the timing for that. So what are some of the typical mistakes that people make when they want to start up their own business, Tim?
Probably a couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head is that they believe or they think that they've got a unique product that nobody else has, which in today's day and age, with pretty much anything that we could ever think of doing has already been done. Now, whether or not you have a unique spin to that or whatever the case may be, that might help.
But you may not be reinventing the wheel here,
But you
right?
might not be reinventing the wheel. It's probably already out there. And then probably the second thing is that some people probably believe it's easier than they think it will be. Or they think it's easier than it will be, because it is a lot of tough work.
You know, it's funny because I talk to business owners that have, like Tim Hortons franchise, just to get into the franchise alone is over $1 million turnkey, and it takes a lot of work, doesn't it?
Exactly, and it's, especially in the franchising world, could be a very big range. I mean, there's some very low-cost franchises, but you might not be making a lot of money at that. Right. There's some very expensive one. There's more expensive than Tim Hortons even.
Really?
Yes.
Like a McDonald's franchise?
McDonald's, Boston Pizza's pretty expensive, all of those, yeah.
That's interesting. So is it safe to say that it's really important to set some reasonable goals? Because a lot of times the first few years are growing pains and you may be losing, not making money.
And it's, take it one step farther back, it's sometimes even before you get into the business, it's doing your due diligence, making sure you have a very clear picture of what is going on, what could happen, how much work is going to be involved, how much money is going to be involved, all the different factors that could enter into affecting how successful your business is.
So how does a person really determine what to charge for their product or service? Doing some of that research? Like
yeah, it's market research, determining, because there's probably stuff out there that is similar to whatever you're trying to market, and then being able to sort of look at what other people are looking at, what they're charging, all that sort of thing, and determining where you fit into the marketplace.
You know what I find really interesting as well, Tim, is when you hear about another fast food restaurant opening up, it's usually, we got to get as close to McDonald's as possible, or to a Burger King. They all seem to collaborate or congregate in the same area. Why do you think that is? One feeds off another, pardon the pun?
Oh no, it's very true, and I believe you're very accurate in that statement. We have several locations where we are in a conglomeration of many food establishments, and it actually does help our business because people then are used to going to a certain area for food, and then it's a matter of, okay, we're going to eat over there today, or we're going to eat over here today, so you have a better chance than if you're off just by yourself.
Tell me about some of the challenges you've had when it comes to owning the Booster Juice franchise. 8 locations.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that we've experienced with that sort of thing, which isn't necessarily related to Booster Juice. It's just business in general.
Okay.
So you're dealing with challenges of employment, and you're dealing with a lot of employees and the HR standards and everything else they have to do. Costs associated with that, like the increased minimum wage that we've had.
How did that impact your business?
Hugely. And it wasn't just one thing. Not to sound negative or anything or get too political, but in the 26 years that we've been in business, this last couple of years has been the first time I've ever felt like as a small business owner, I'm under attack almost, insofar as just with everything that's piled on with the increase in minimum wage, changes to stat pay, changes to other HR standards, carbon taxes, which have increased all of our input costs, that sort of thing. It really has made a change to how we operate and how we do business.
I think I know how you're going to be voting next spring.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some of the businesses that may be needed here in Lethbridge. Could we see some more restaurants? And I know restaurant owners, they have their challenges too. Many go under after the first 5 years.
Correct. And food stuff in that sort of way is always more volatile in the marketplace. It depends on what the food is, like types of food, what kind of service it is.
Different ethnic foods.
Exactly, and we're seeing more and more of that. Actually, I deal with a couple of clients that with my business advising at Tech Connect that are doing some really unique things with South American and Central American food. So which is nice because we have people that are immigrants to Canada. They've come here from another country, and they're bringing their unique flavors and styles of food and everything to our area here.
How about some of the Syrian and maybe Iraqi refugees? Are they bringing some of their delicious food? And
yeah, actually, and there's another group that we're dealing with over at Tech Connect as well that is Syrian food. Yeah.
What about marketing? Okay, marketing and social media marketing.
Yes.
How prominent is that in having a powerful online presence for your business?
Huge. It's marketing in general, with that, just like with any other business, is a hugely integral part of how successful your business is going to be. You could have the world's best widget or whatever you're trying to sell.
Or pizza.
Or pizza, whatever it might be. But if nobody knows about it, if the word doesn't get out there, that nobody's going to buy it, meaning you're not going to be successful. So marketing in general is a very integral part. And yes, the social media side of things, especially in today's day and age, is a very, very big component of it. Although I would caution, it's not the only component to it. As I always use an analogy when I'm talking marketing is that social media or radio or TV or whatever it might be is one tool in the toolbox. You can't build a house with just a screwdriver.
So don't put all your eggs in that one basket.
Exactly. You need to have diversified marketing to be a long-term success.
What's interesting is many years ago I worked as a country music radio announcer, and I got to know a lot of the country music stars, and Garth Brooks, the country music star, was saying, I don't have the best voice out there, but I've got the best marketing team out there.
Yep.
And he studied marketing in college.
Yep. You know, it's very true. You don't have to, I mean, think of any product that is almost a staple today.
Like a burger.
A burger or
right?
whatever. McDonald's burger, and nothing against McDonald's, I eat their burgers too. But whatever it might be, is that they might not be the best product, but there's other factors that put them sort of at the top of the market. Marketing is a big, huge part of it. Consistency, location, all that other stuff enters into the picture as well.
How about a name? Remember when Google first came out, people were like, what is a Google?
Yeah.
And now it's an adjective. I mean, it's just like,
and it's become sort of like Kleenex, which actually isn't.
Or we used to Xerox things.
Yes,
right? Photocopy, not
precisely,
Xerox,
precisely, where the brand actually becomes the name, and it's very true that names can be very important, but there was a whole bunch of marketing that went along with that to make it go to that extent. It just didn't happen by itself.
What are some of the rookie mistakes, Tim, that entrepreneurs make today?
It's I would say a couple of different things. That it's going to be easier than it really is going to be. They think it's going to be easier. Not doing their due diligence, so they don't have a clear picture of how much work it's going to take or what strategies they might have to entail to get to where they want to go.
So a business plan is pretty important, isn't it?
Very, very important. And having a really pragmatic look. Sometimes as an entrepreneur, we get sort of in love with whatever we're doing, and we don't necessarily see the pitfalls or the downsides or different things like that. And you have to be pretty pragmatic as a business person.
Maybe objective as well?
Yes.
Kind of stand back,
look at it from the outside. Getting outside advice, I think, is very key for whatever you're doing. So if you have friends or family, which is sometimes a little biased, but if you can get into a group of business people that you can sort of draw on each other or draw on each other's experiences, or get a business advisor, talk to your accountant, talk to your lawyer, all those different things to get those outside perspectives. So at least makes you think. It might not necessarily change the decision that you make, but at least you're getting some outside advice.
How often do you hear of entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, who received a golden handshake, like what happened in Oshawa with the GM plant, and they want to start up a new business? How often do you hear of that?
Oh, quite often.
Second career, right?
Quite often. And the, especially even when in Alberta here with the oil issues that we had, when everybody had their payouts from that, you saw a big spike in the number of small businesses.
What kind of businesses did we see?
All sorts of stuff, whether it was consulting stuff related to their existing field, or you had people trying to get into different types of businesses or franchises that are related, totally unrelated to the oil industry. But they had, they had some cash because they had a payout, and they were trying to find different ways of earning a living from that point on. Now, some worked, obviously, and some wouldn't work. That just is the way it goes.
What are some of the average startup costs if we're looking at maybe starting, I don't know, like say, even a pet store, let's say? Not a big name pet store like a Petco or PetSmart or whatever, but maybe something local. Could you start at around 100K? Like, can you get in?
It's it would be hard to say because I'm not familiar how much it costs to bring in dog food, for instance.
Right, yeah, that's right.
But I mean, there are a lot of costs that are associated with starting a business, especially, so you have to rent a space somewhere if you're doing a retail store of some sort, and that's not cheap.
And a lot of those landlords want leases of what, 10, 15, 20? Yeah, they want to know you're going to be there for the long term.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Usually minimum of 5, more often it's 10.
Right.
So you're signing a lease for a long period of time. Usually if you're a new business or a private business, there's going to be some sort of personal guarantees on that, meaning that even if the business fails, they're still coming after you for the money. So you need to make sure, and that goes back to making sure you have a clear sort of view of all of the different things that could happen and what can go on.
So Tim, there are some misconceptions as well when people think, I'm going to be my own business owner. I don't want to take orders from a boss anymore. I want to be the boss, right? Well, guess what? All of your customers and your clients become your boss, essentially.
For sure.
And there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. I talked to a gentleman that owns a Dairy Queen. He had to go to the U of DQ.
Yes.
Why don't you tell our viewers what that's all about?
Well, and with most franchises, almost any franchises, there's some sort of training program that goes along with it. So if you're going to buy into a franchise, you will have to go to a training somewhere. Me personally, I went to Booster U at the head office.
And you graduated,
for
obviously.
2 weeks. I did, yes. You have to write a test. It's very intensive. You do everything. Whether Dairy Queen, you're flipping burgers. For me, I was making smoothies, all that sort of stuff. But any franchise would have a training program of some sort where you would have to learn all of that stuff.
What's the most popular smoothie right now?
Right now, that's a good question. Probably Hail to the Kale is going pretty good.
Oh, with kale, okay.
Yeah,
Very healthy, right?
Yes, and then Strawberry Sunshine Mango Hurricane are always
that sounds more my speed. That's nice.
Yeah.
What about public relations, customer relations? How important is that as well for people who come to you with complaints about your business?
Well, when any business that you have, and when you're dealing with customers, you're always going to run into issues of some sort at some point. Sometimes there is justification for that, an employee makes a mistake or there's not a process followed and something's just wrong. Sometimes, though, it can be unreasonable in that sort of thing, and it's how you respond to it that's going to sort of define your business. So even if it is something that isn't necessarily in control, you still have to make every attempt to solve the problem and to work with the customer and that sort of thing.
So after you graduated, with the Booster Juice University there, did you look at hiring managers who had lots of experience working at Booster Juice? They kind of knew the template, the business model, proper protocol, the flow, the workflow,
exactly. Right? And we would love to, if you could. So when we started, and this is going back 10 or 11 years, we had 2 stores. We inherited a couple of different employees with those stores, but we've learned over the years that invariably we run into issues where when we take over a store, that there's a turnover of staff because of different policies, different procedures, whatever it might be. And what we found is that we hire good people with good personalities, train them, and then we've had the best success of having existing employees moving to assistant manager to a manager, rather than bringing outside people in.
Outside of the financial benefits, what are some of the big rewards you've seen owning these Booster Juices and being a local business person with over 26 years of experience?
Well, and it's with the different businesses that we've had over that period of time and that sort of thing. I remember in an interview quite a few years ago, I said that I never worked so hard for so little of my life, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And it's true. If you're an entrepreneur, if this is what you want to do, you don't you don't want to do anything else. You want to be working for yourself, building something for yourself, and having it more control over what your life takes, kind of thing. Yeah. But it isn't for everybody. I'm completely honest. I'm not saying I'm special. I'm just different, in that way. That and not everybody can do that with the stress of, you get paid last. All your employees get paid first, but you get paid last. If you need to come up with money for paying the rent or paying the payroll or whatever it might be.
How about hiring family members? Bringing in your wife or your kids?
And I did work.
Is that frowned upon?
I've seen both good sides and bad sides to that. On my good side, I did actually have my wife working with us on our publication company that we had for 10 years. She worked in our office. She ran that particular part of our business, and it worked very, very well. I've heard
your marriage survived.
Marriage survived. We're still good. 22 years coming up. So that is a good news story. But I've definitely heard of other sides where it just doesn't work. Yeah.
Tim Rempel, local businessman, and with Tech Connect and Economic Development Lethbridge, an advisor for people starting up a new business. Thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
The Bible is the world's best-selling book of all time. Now the question is it the most read book in today's world? In other words, many Canadians own a Bible, but are they actually reading it? Joining me now from Florence, South Carolina is Michael Grady, author of Making God Part of Your Family. Welcome to Bridge City News, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Hal.
Now, first of all, can you explain to our viewers what your book is all about and what you hope to accomplish with it?
Absolutely. The book is the retelling of the Old Testament stories. And actually, in follow-up to your original questions, do they read the Bible? I've been teaching 8 to 12-year-olds and 30 to 70-year-olds for over 30 years. And you sit in church and everybody talks about how the Bible is the most important book in the world. You ask them if they read it. They have to begrudgingly say, no, they don't. And so over the years, I've kind of compiled why they haven't. And they say that I can't understand it. It's boring. And the Old Testament's not relevant. And so I felt like that I could dispel some of that. And after teaching it to the classes, I've decided that maybe I could share it to a wider audience and put it in paper. And so that's the purpose of my book, is making God part of your family. I would love the idea of the family reading the Bible together. But if they don't understand it, and they think it's boring and they don't think it's relevant, then how do I change that? So the stories are retelling the stories so it would be engaging. I also tried to make them easier to understand. And then I point out how relevant they are, because I believe the Old Testament is pointing to Christ. And everything about that is how we get back into a relationship with God. And so I've used a lot of the New Testament ideas to explain the Old Testament stories and documented that through. And also tried to keep the stories to about a 15-minute read. People don't like to read, so if you do it where it's engaging and easier to understand and not so long, then maybe you can get the family together. It's written kind of unique about this, I believe. It's not a children's book, sometimes because I'm known for teaching the children, but it's written on an adult level. But I know an 8 to 12-year-old could understand it because I've been teaching for 30 years, and that's how I teach them.
So, Michael, your book is not really a translation, but rather a study guide for families?
It is. It is intended to retell each of the stories and point out how they relate to our lives, both on a daily basis and for eternity. And so it's practical living and how those stories, I believe God chose those stories for a specific reason to communicate something to us, not just to tell us a history. I believe it is history, but I also believe that God chose specific stories to help us learn language. These people are just like us. They made lots of mistakes, and there's not everything in the stories that if they would be talking about my family, I'm not sure I would have told some of those things that God does. But I think he did that so that we could learn that they're real people and they make mistakes. There's jealousy, there's favoritism, there's all the elements that we have in families today, and we can learn from those stories.
What kind of feedback are you receiving so far from families?
I have been thrilled. It's part of the problem is a former CPA from Florence, South Carolina, not a big town, not very well known, don't have the credibility in the Christian community. But for those I'm able to get in front of and people read the books, I've just been overwhelmed. That's why I went forward enough along that I've written the second volume. The first volume is the first 5 books. And my second volume is Joshua through 1 Samuel. And so I have one more volume to get through the Old Testament. But I was so pleased with it that because they say it really can relate, and it gives them, it's written on a layman's term. While it's a Bible study, it's written from a layman to a layman. And I believe that it makes it conversational, and they've really enjoyed that because it makes it easier to discuss it with their children and bring up topics.
So, Michael, when it comes to Bible reading, even for Christians, the stats are not very encouraging. Why are so few people of faith failing to spend time in God's Word, reading their Bibles?
I believe that too few of them think that it's the true Word of God. I think we've lost that. When I was growing up, I think most of my people in the church believed that this was God's Word. I don't find that even in the churches throughout. And if they do, everybody's too busy. We've let the world distract us from any and everything. And so I don't have time. I tease my children that I teach. They say they don't have time to read the Bible. And I said, well, you have time to play video games? Well, yeah, I do have time to play the video games. So it's just not a priority. And that's sad. And that's why I've tried to make it a little more engaging so that when they do sit down and do it, they can have an interesting time together.
Yeah, make time for God and He'll make time for us. Now, there are many who argue that the Bible is a book that's really unreliable and even inaccurate. How do you respond to those critics?
Well, I'd say try reading it and seeing how the prophecies have been revealed. It is amazing. I would probably acknowledge that there are a few things in there that I can't explain. Because I can't explain them doesn't mean that they're not true, but there are a few. But there are hundreds, thousands of things that make it just absolutely jump off the page of giving you evidences of faith. I mean, there are things that were predicted that were just amazing. How Moses laid out the story of the Passover and how that came true and how Christ died, even on the Passover. There are just innumerable amounts of instances, and I try to point them out in the book to say, how in the world can we not believe it? Because certainly some of the things we don't know when they were written, but the law was written in around 1500 BC, give or take some, and yet they come true at the birth and during the time of Christ. And how Abraham was sacrificed as offered his son to be offered. Isn't that a beautiful picture of how Jesus was offered by his Father on the cross? And if you go back in and look at it, things that we wouldn't know by reading the Old Testament, God asked Abraham to go to the land of Moriah. Well, when you read Genesis, that wouldn't mean anything to you until you get into where Solomon says the land of Moriah was Jerusalem. So Abraham was sacrificed, offered his son Isaac to be sacrificed on the exact same spot where Jesus was offered for sacrifice. Isn't that amazing? That to me is just overwhelming how they could turn that out. When the Passover lamb was offered as a sacrifice so that the angel of death would pass over, they were given very specific instructions. And when they were eating the lamb, they were told not to break the legs. And then when Jesus was on the cross, what did they do? They were told to break the legs, but when they came to Jesus, they didn't break the legs. Is that not building a faith? Does that not show that these things are true? Just overwhelm me with those types of instances.
So Michael, outside of playing video games, is there another reason why fewer young people are interested in reading the Bible?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think they find it hard to understand and boring, and that's what I've written the book to try to help that. But oftentimes, I read this with my granddaughters. That's been one of the benefits that I've received out of this, is that it gave me a chance to go through it with them. And getting them to sit down and read, even though the last time they said, hey, we had a great time, sitting down to get them to read again is hard. But once I do, boy, they start getting into it. I cannot read a first page without them already asking questions about it. And so I think it's something as we as parents and grandparents have to sometimes discipline our children, discipline not in a negative way, but in a positive way, to develop a habit of sitting down and reading it together. I find the earlier you start, the children 7, 8, 9, 10 years old love to have it read to them. And that's why I made this conversational. So when you read it to them, they enjoy that part. I read the Chronicles of Narnia with my children, enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And we read some other things together. We always had a devotion, but I didn't have this book. And with my granddaughters, I've had to read the book with them. And somehow there's a negative connotation to sitting down and reading the Bible, and we have to change that concept.
So to what extent do you think our overscheduled lives really conflict with making God a daily priority and reading His Word?
Well, when I was growing up, Wednesday nights, you didn't have ball practice. Now, look, I love sports. I was into every one of them, but couldn't go on Wednesday night, couldn't practice, couldn't do anything on Wednesday night because that was church night. Couldn't go on Sunday because that was church day. And so now I have many kids not show up at church because they go to travel ball on the weekends. We've set our standards up so that church is not a priority. Our lives are a priority. We say family's a priority. My answer always is, if family's a priority, then you should be at church on Sundays and be at any other activities. Not every activity, because there are a lot, but you need to make enough activities so that your children know what's a priority.
Now, many people believe the Bible is no longer relevant in today's society, especially for their daily lives. Any thoughts on how we can really bridge this misconception?
I think if you read the stories, that's what I've tried to point out. How many families already think their children one child is favored over the other, and having instances of that. And I was having one of the United Methodist pastors reading this story with 3 of his grandchildren from different families, and they were reading the part about the favoritism in the coat of colors, Joseph, the coat of many colors story, where Jacob was showing favoritism to Joseph. And one of the brothers said, I don't see this applies to me at all. And the other one says, do you remember when you got this and I didn't? And in other words, they started talking about it, and it really became alive with them when you start relating it to your own self and your own life. There's jealousies there too.
Now, you posed the question, why has God chosen to speak in picture language and even mysteries instead of being a little more direct? What do you say about that?
Well, Jesus taught in parables, and he said that because he wanted those who had a difficult time hearing God's word would miss the whole point. But those that were willing to open their ears would get the picture very clear. And I think that's what he did in the Old Testament. The Old Testament's are parables. They're just a little bit longer stories of history. And I think that if we take the time to read the story and see the relevance of it, all of a sudden it's not as much of a mystery as it is a revelation that God's trying to reveal us to his word, and it becomes simple and clear. Some things were not clear in the Old Testament, and the mysteries were cleared up. Paul tries to clear up some of them when he writes them too. And I think sometimes we need a little bit of help. And that was the reason I tried to give them my explanation. I had many Bible teachers growing up that helped me learn what's going through the Bible. And so that I wanted to pass that on to others. I was very fortunate. I had a mother that read the Bible with me starting with 5 years old.
Wow. Now, you suggest that spending time as a family, putting God first, creates a more peaceful and richer family life. How does this really work?
Because you're able to attack problems before they occur. If you can already identify something that's an issue in the life or issue that's going on with the family, the circumstances that are generated in these stories, if you're able to talk about them before they happen, when they do occur, you have something to fall back on. You have something to already have solved the problem with. And I think that was what God was trying to do for us with these stories.
You know what I think is really interesting as well with the Bible, Michael, is you can crack open the index and have a look at stirring up dissension. You know, if you work with somebody or maybe somebody in your family likes to create drama, there's a scripture on that, you know, sickness, health, marriage issues. It's all right there for you. It's pretty much black and white. It's like a lifestyle, a book to guide us through life, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's why I was saying if we read this, it's making it part of your family. In fact, it's kind of the title has double meaning. It's making God part of your family, so we're reading it together to understand his word, but we're also reading about our family history. You know, everybody's all tied up in about ancestry, and these are really our ancestors. And Abraham said, Paul says that as the children of faith are the true descendants of Abraham. And so these are really our forefathers. And then we all like to read about our own family.
Now, you write that God has a plan for mankind. What is it, and how is it best communicated within our own families?
I believe that God, as soon as Adam and Eve chose to eat the fruit, God had a plan of redemption. Isn't that wonderful to know that every time we fail, God's there to pick us up and have a plan to do that? And I think he did that in the opening chapters in Genesis 3:15 when they fell. While they were being punished, he also said, I have a plan. Jesus is coming. Genesis 3:15 very clearly says the seed of the woman would come and save mankind. And that starts there. We already mentioned about the story where Abraham sacrificed Isaac or offered Isaac. And I believe that was a beautiful picture of what God was going to redeem us to one day. And they're just picture after picture of God showing us that he was coming and that we needed him as a savior. And he first wanted us to prove we couldn't do it. And boy, those Old Testament patriarchs really prove they can't do it on their own. And neither can I. And Hal, I bet you might not be able to.
Yeah. Amen. Michael Grady, author of Making God Part of Your Family. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Florence, South Carolina.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Have a wonderful night.